We're learning more about what's inside of the stimulus plan that was just passed by the Senate, the $1 trillion infrastructure bill that was just passed on the Senate side. Overnight, actually, before we get into some of the details on this, a number of House Republicans have come forward and said they are not going to vote on this thing until, and then only until, they get this other infrastructure package brought up. They sent a letter to Nancy Pelosi saying 9 of them. And she, by the way, cannot lose 3 votes. So 9 of them, Democrats have said, we will not vote on this until you get the $3.5 trillion stimulus package to the floor and brought up in front of us. Otherwise, we're not voting for this. So she's got some
is
trouble. Is
healthcare and minimum wage in there then?
Well, again, we don't know what's in it. So no, I mean, I don't know. But here's the thing: it's not even progressives that have sent this letter. It's moderate Democrats that have sent this letter, like New Jersey's Gottheimer and others who were supporting the tax reductions on the rich, right? So it's interesting to see what Nancy Pelosi's got on her plate. But David Dayen's done some great reporting. I'm a big fan of David Dayen. He's a fan of our show. He's been a guest on our show multiple times. And what he has analyzed in this infrastructure bill is fascinating. And he says that in broadband and other areas, the corporate dominance that has been an impediment to progress emerges unscathed. What is he talking about? Well, one of the clearest examples of how broadband is treated in this infrastructure bill is that they get $75 or $65 billion investment in broadband, with an emphasis on getting low-income and rural households connected and closing the digital divide. But how much of that money will actually go towards meeting these goals? It turns out not very much, or any of it, quite frankly. The initial Biden proposal gave $100 billion to broadband, right? So basically, we're going to funnel money to Comcast and AT&T.
Comcast, the richest company in the United States, the biggest lobbyer of Congress.
Exactly. And little companies, little mom and pop broadband service, no, they don't get it. The big companies get this money, and without any teeth to it. Basically, a no strings attached. Here you go. We hope that you'll use this to bring broadband access to the roughly 12 million American children who didn't have access to go to school during a pandemic, to those communities that are, very remote and don't have broadband access. We hope you'll do that. Will you?
And if we do, we'll throttle it.
Unfortunately, yeah, that's true, because they said in areas where, for instance, to your point, basically they've been trying to, right now, the $42 billion in state level grants is prioritized to unserved areas, defined as areas with no access to broadband with at least 25 to over 3 megabits per second, which has been the standard minimum since 2015. Underserved areas, by contrast, are set at 100 over 20 megabits per second.
You're talking about little companies and how little companies wouldn't have a chance against Comcast, right? Well, Google had Google Fiber that they were trying to launch around the country, and that's what they were trying to do. They were going to do 25 over 25 would be free to a home. If you wanted more to that, you would have to pay. But Comcast took them to court and sued them so many times that it became impossible for Google to afford to keep going forward. So they stopped the project, and it's in certain cities now, but they can't expand because Comcast was litigating the hell out of them with their money because they want that monopoly.
Yeah, so these little telecoms have no, they can't get access here, right? And as they
if
point
Google
out,
doesn't have a chance.
right? Yeah, if Google can't handle it, then what are these going to do? Because unserved areas get the money first. Areas where the incumbent telecoms already operate, even if underserved, are unlikely to qualify for much of the funding. Small nonprofits, electrical co-ops, and muni broadband operations do not get priority. Who gets priority? AT&T, Comcast. They basically are capturing this pot of money, because as they have in the past. And they have in the past captured this money with the same caveat that here you go, AT&T, here you go, Comcast, you need to use this money towards providing broadband service to underserved areas with no hand slapping if they don't. Guess what? They didn't do it.
Of course not. Like,
they didn't do it.
What happened when we bailed out the big banks and stuff? Like, you would need to pass these loans and give loans to the people if we bail you out. And all the executives got bonuses and stuff.
Yeah, they didn't use it. This is infuriating. back in 2015 and again in 2020, they were given $4.6 billion in subsidies under the Federal Communications Connect America Fund to put expansion in these underserved areas. So what did Comcast and AT&T do? They took the money and didn't use it for that. What does the government do? They don't do anything about it. They just took $4.6 billion to put in broadband in underserved areas and didn't do anything about it. I mean,
well, I wonder how much of that money ended up back in super PACs.
Yeah, of course it did. You know, that's the thing. It just, they take this money and it circulates right back to the members of Congress. You know, it's just like this is disgusting. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you're not going to see covered in the mainstream media. Certainly you're not going to see it on an NBC Comcast show, will you?
It's hidden inside trading.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to see CNBC cover this story. Hey, our parent company, well, they're doing some shady stuff. You're not going to see that on CNBC, are you? Of course not. The IIJA grant, 10 times that money, right? So now, and forget the Connect America Fund from 2015. The new infrastructure bill, the Infrastructure and Jobs Act that was just passed, has 10 times the amount of money for broadband. And these monopoly telecoms have been so skilled at picking and choosing neighborhoods to build out, only capturing the more profitable pockets. So they take the money and they only build out in profitable neighborhoods, not in underserved communities.
How much did Elon Musk get of that for his internet project?
From what I can tell, zero.
Huh. So he's left out of the car thing, the electric car deal. He's left out of.
Yeah, he builds a Starlink service with a satellite that brings internet to underserved areas around the world. I don't see him getting this honeypot because I guess you have to lay cable in order to be included in this. But it's amazing to me that these companies, these telecoms, can literally cherry pick which projects they want to do, and they're only picking the most profitable neighborhoods, right? So they're not going into the underserved areas. They're going into $300,000, $400,000 home areas. And they're getting subsidized to do it.
It's rewarding the wrong behavior. It's just like we were talking about with the banks and stuff. When they bailed out all those executives, nobody went to jail for that. So these guys got our money. So understand, we gave Comcast, we did, out of our pocket, $4 billion, AT&T and all that, to use for us to get better internet infrastructure, and we didn't get it. So we keep bailing out all these big companies that don't need it, and we get nothing in return. It goes to the rich. It continues to funnel to the rich.
And no wonder they want to pass this thing so fast, so we don't know what's in it, right? I mean, they don't want us to know this stuff. They don't want us to know what's in this thing. A provision in this bill that mandates the FCC to prevent digital redlining, i.e. that picking and choosing, right? It did make it into the bill, along with $14 billion for a voucher program of $30 a month to help low-income users pay for broadband, and $2.75 billion for teaching untrained people how to use the internet. Of course, such subsidies and training will also benefit the existing telecom firms offering broadband. The requirements for grantees to offer a low-cost price with no actual dollar figure attached to that and disclose their broadband rates are nice, but it's hard to comparison shop when there's only one carrier, and is often the case in many communities.
Well, and like I was saying earlier about Comcast being the biggest lobbyer of Congress, they lobbied Congress, and now not only can they charge you an outrageous amount for internet, but now they can actually throttle it, and you have to, if you use more, you pay more. So they can actually say, if you're paying $79 a month and you go over like 5 gigs or whatever, they can charge you, like they can just bump up the prices. And it's just like they keep opening things up to make them more and more money. I mean, you're talking like one of the biggest corporations in the United States, and they're getting it's like Bezos. It's ridiculous that they get any kind of subsidies whatsoever when you've got small businesses, over 100,000 small businesses that went out of business during a pandemic. You couldn't have taken some of that money and just given it to them with no strings attached, no clawbacks.
Yeah, nothing. No strings attached.
That would have helped the economy way more than this will. This is not going to help us at all.
You know, if we go back to the original proposal, right, it was supposed to help, right? The American Jobs Plan was supposed to give $100 billion to broadband, which would have structurally reshaped the U.S. broadband market. It vowed to blanket the nation with coverage, increasing the minimum speeds that constitute broadband internet. Importantly, it promised to prioritize support for broadband networks owned and operated by or affiliated with local governments, nonprofits, and cooperatives, which are less constrained than the telecoms were by the profit motive. And they're more willing to commit universal service, right? You've seen these services by different cities. They have like internet set up in the parks and things like that. Philadelphia famously with their Wi-Fi project for the whole city. And it stated that it would override a series of laws on the books in nearly 24 states that prevent co-ops or municipal broadband networks from competing with like the likes of a Comcast and AT&T. Unfortunately, that was all stripped from the bill. That language was all ripped out of the bill. So there's nothing in there that curtails that. And now these big telecoms basically there's no preference for these small municipal providers or anything. And so they have the brilliant ability to be able to go in there and pick and choose what they want from the stimulus package. Bravo, government, once again, doing the bidding of corporates.
Could you imagine? Could you imagine if Comcast, as rich as they are, would just say, "Okay, you know what? We're gonna put broadband in every city, and we're gonna give people 10 over 10 free. So you can have 10 over 10 or 5 over 5 or something like that. That's absolutely free." They would still make enough money from people upgrading to higher speeds, like people like me, people like you, that they would be just fine. But like you can see that their agenda is not to help people. Their agenda is just to keep making that money.
Yeah. And hey, they're paying the politicians' pockets, you know, they're lining their pockets for their campaigns. Wonder how many of these politicians that, you know, that it'd be so easy to find out, right? Who pulled these provisions? Who pulled these things out of the bill? And are they paid for by Comcast and AT&T? Do they bankroll their campaigns? The problem is it's hard to see who actually pulls out different amendments and who scraps different amendments. Like that's all done behind closed doors, so we don't know.
It'd have to be. It'd have to be a money thing because what, like if you were in Congress and there was that deal coming up, would you look at that and be like, "Oh, we can't have that in there"? If you weren't directly related to Comcast or something, like why would that matter to you?
Yeah. Exactly. That's the only reason it would matter to you, right? It's money.
Exactly.
It's the only reason.
People pay my rent. I better worry about this one.
Thanks for subscribing to the channel. You can also become a channel member by going to morninginvest.com/join, where you can stick it to the mainstream media and support independent journalism. We're able to bring you the stories that you won't see on any of the major billionaire-backed networks. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time, everyone.